My guest at this time is renowned pollster John McLaughlin. He joined us to talk about the midterm campaign last year, and he's out with a new poll looking forward to the 2020 campaign, which suggests that President Donald Trump might be in significantly better shape than anyone realized, particularly among a specific minority group. And John, thanks very much for being with us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back with you.
Well, McLaughlin Associates ran a poll looking at a number of different things, and we'll get into several things here as time permits over the next few minutes. But the thing that jumps out here is that 50% of Hispanics approve of Trump's job, and 47% have a favorable opinion of him. This is going to catch a lot of people by surprise. So how surprised were you by this?
Not really, because first of all, the survey was 1,000 likely voters who are going to vote in 2020. Also, you have 111 Hispanic voters in the survey, and the sample of Hispanic voters are 5-3 Democratic. And again, they are the Hispanic vote is not monolithic in the United States. So a lot of people like to put it in a box, or you get a lot of surveys where they say adult Hispanics, et cetera. These are citizens. These are citizens who are likely voters, and they are also, I've seen it trending up lately, these are mainly people who came here legally. And right now, what we find in our research, not in this survey, but in other research, the group that is most upset about the current immigration crisis, where you have illegal immigrants coming here jumping the line over those who did it right and spent time and money to come here legally. Plus, you have a lot of these Hispanic voters have been here for a while. So what's going on right now is with President Trump trying to fix the system and try to get it done right, where a lot of these Hispanic voters are pretty supportive. So in the survey, it didn't surprise me at all. I mean, overall in the survey, the president, since our last February survey, which was done right after the State of the Union, the president's had a net gain on his job approval among all voters, where he went to a 49% approval and only 50% disapprove. But it's similar to what you saw, those of us who are old enough to remember, Ronald Reagan, where his numbers weren't so good in 1982, but in 83, as the economy recovered and improved, his numbers also went up. And in this survey, you have 5-4. Majority of the voters say the economy is getting better rather than worse. So that's probably helping the president as well, because you had 51% saying the economy is getting better and only 40% saying it's getting worse. So that's helping him at the same time. So overall, there's a chance. And again, the survey was done March 20th through 24th. So when we were coming out of the field, that's when the Mueller report was just hitting. So the president has an opportunity, finally, with the 2-year collusion investigation being out of the way, and where Attorney General Barr and Mueller have said there's no evidence of collusion, and the Attorney General ruling that there's no grounds for obstruction of justice. Finally, this investigation is gone. And those of us who worked in the Trump campaign knew that there was nothing to this. I mean, personally, I met with the president plenty of times during the campaign, early on, particularly when it was a lean and mean campaign, and none of that fantasy was going on. It was really a myth. And those of us who were in that campaign, where they were surveilling, our server. So whenever I sent polling data into the campaign, I'm sure that that investigation was getting all those emails and getting all the data, and that's pretty scary to those of us who have a long history of working in the United States, where somebody could actually be spying on somebody else's campaign. So I digress from the poll, but the reality of this is the president has an opportunity to build on his job approval. He has an environment where he can broaden his base and go well beyond the Republican. He has a very strong Republican base. If you noticed in the survey, and again, we have the numbers are on our website at McLaughlinOnline.com, but among Republicans and independents who would vote in a Republican primary nationally, the president has 80% of the Republican vote, to John Kasich at 5% and William Weld at 1%. And also he's regaining his change message, because when we worked for the president back in 2016, he ran on a message of change, moving away from the policies of Barack Obama, and rather than continuing. Here in this survey, people say they want change again, 49-41, and that certainly helps the president because he's got an ability to move, to broaden his base and move into other areas among independent voters and among moderates, et cetera. But Republicans in the survey, they approved the job the president's doing 87-13, and those who voted for him in 2016, it's 90-10. So his base is rock solid. Now it's time to actually broaden his base.
All right, well, let's dig into these numbers a little bit more then. First of all, historically speaking, how well does approval translate to votes? In other words, is there a realistic chance he could get 50% of the Hispanic vote? I remember Republicans doing cartwheels in 2004 when George W. Bush got 43% of the vote. You've also got him at 16% approval among African Americans. Overall, how well does approval translate to votes?
Well, in the post 9/11 era, where things have gotten very partisan, it's a very strong determinant of how votes are going to go. When you look back at the 2004 race, when we were polling, we did polling for Bush Cheney as well as other candidates, and we had published polls in July of 2004 where President Bush had a 51% job approval among likely voters. Same in October among all likely voters, he had a 51% job approval. And guess what? He got reelected with 51%. But we also have a Spanish-speaking polling company, Opinions Latinas, who was doing polling for the Latino coalition during that election. And in October, we found that the president President Bush at the time, was going to get 43% of the Hispanic vote, and people made fun of us for it. There were other firms saying that wasn't going to happen. Guess what? The number, it was nailed. It was rock solid. He got 43% of the Hispanic vote in that election, and he won re-election with 51%. Now, on the other side, President Obama, on Election Day in 2012, he had a 51% job approval, and he got 51% of the vote. So President Trump, when he first was elected, we spoke a couple days before Christmas in 2016, before he took office, and we had a survey where we asked people did they approve the job he was doing as president-elect, and 48% approved and 41% disapproved. And in the phone conversation, I told the president that you better get your helmet on because the Democrats are not going to want you to get over 50%. Because once you get over 50%, not only can you get elected, but with the Republican Senate and the House that he had at the time, you can get a lot done. But unfortunately for us, little did we know they had this Russian collusion investigation going and everything else going along with it because since President Trump is probably the only person in history in a historic election to defeat the GOP establishment, then go on and defeat the Washington establishment, they've been throwing the kitchen sink at him ever since he got elected to try to slow him down and stop his progress. But here he is once again succeeding. The economy's moving. They're creating jobs. America's stronger. He's doing what he can to secure the border. And that's another thing with Hispanic voters. We didn't have a question in here about abolishing ICE and about, going after gangs like MS-13 and getting rid of violent criminals, et cetera, and which plague on that community the worst. I've seen polls where we've had from members of Congress and other candidates where the support among Hispanics is very strong for, again, reducing that gang influence, the drug influence, and securing the borders, making sure this gets done right.
Let's look at one other thing before we have to say goodbye here, and that is traditionally a lot of pollsters and pundits talk about the gender gap, and there is one. In this survey, men prefer Trump 53-46, and women disapprove of Trump 53-46. But the bigger gap here, and I've noticed this for a number of cycles now, is married versus single is getting really lopsided. Married folks, 60% approve versus 40% disapprove. But it's almost exactly the opposite for single folks, 60% disapprove, 38% approve. And the trend lines in this country is that fewer people are getting married. So what's the long-term effect of that?
Well, the way we ask that question is single, never married. We have other categories in our crosstabs that we put up. Again, the results are on McLaughlinOnline.com. But the trend of that is with married voters, certainly they tend to be more Republican to begin with, more conservative. The single, never married voters, until they get married at some point, are less conservative and more progressive in some regards and younger in that. I think the most concerning thing is we've had survey results on our website, and we have some now, where younger voters consider socialism acceptable. Younger voters think America is the source of the world's problems. There's a big generational divide, and that that plays into that as well. So, but there is a difference, and what you'll notice is Republicans do well. They do best with married men, and then next group they do better with is married women. And then when you have single men, they do better with that, and then they don't do as well with single women. So there's a gender divide that we have to work on and we have to broaden. And that's why the president, when he did his State of the Union address, when he was talking about lowering prescription drugs, when he was talking about covering pre-existing conditions, when he was talking about paid family leave, when he gave those policy proposals and others in the State of the Union, his numbers in our surveys among battleground ticket-splitting voters went up, and particularly went up among women. So I think you're going to see the president looking to broaden his coalition and looking to close that gap.
John, fascinating numbers, not what a lot of folks expected to see, although you don't seem too surprised by it. We'll see what happens here as more candidates get in and the race solidifies a bit. Remind folks, though, where they can find more detailed numbers on your survey.
If you want to go look at the numbers are on our website, McLaughlinOnline.com. They're published there, and you can take a look.
John McLaughlin, McLaughlin Associates. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.